Thank you all for staying. For those of you who have stayed, we're going to do some experiential exercises today, so you'll be rewarded for hanging around. I just love the way that goat got really close to the camera. Let's see. So how many of you were here yesterday? Okay, so you'll see a few of the slides that are repeated, but for the most part, we'll be going into greater depth. We'll be doing, like I said, some actual mindfulness practice together so that we can send you off on your way feeling even calmer and more relaxed. All the speakers have been so relaxing and inspiring to listen to. So we are a mindfulness-based social emotional learning organization. And our approach is really to embed daily mindfulness practice in education. That's where students are every day, and that's where we can cultivate these habits and skills of mind from pre-K through 12th grade. And for those of you who weren't here yesterday, we had an alarm go off. It was the national alert. And typically in a school, when there's an active shooter drill or a lockdown, both students and educators are returned to the classroom or go home for the day without anything to really settle or calm their nervous system after that. So we actually, after looking at a lot of the research, decided to create some special practices called Settle and Soothe, and this is specifically designed for after drills or alarms, alerts like we had yesterday. And so we're going to do this practice right now, and it's very short. It's just about 3 minutes long. Typically, it's an additional practice. In our series, we encourage everyone to be trauma-informed with our practice, to either feel free to close their eyes or soften their gaze or just gently gaze downward. And so I invite you to do that. This instruction is to close your eyes, but I just want to make sure that you feel free to do that. So if we could play that video.
Let's take a few minutes together to pause and reset after the experience you just had. Let's begin by closing the eyes and turning attention inwards, feeling sensations of the feet on the ground, noticing the support of the floor on the soles of the feet. Paying attention to the breath, breathing in breathing out. Not trying to do anything to change the breath, just noticing as it comes and goes. Now, intentionally slowing and deepening the breath for a few breath cycles. Breathing and lengthening the time between each in-breath and each out-breath. Continuing to breathe in this way and taking a few moments to notice if you feel stress anywhere in the body. Allowing the coming and going of sensations and thoughts. Breathing and releasing any remaining tension. And when ready, opening the eyes. Thanks for joining me today.
So I'd love to hear from you. How did that feel for everyone? Just taking those few moments. I know it's especially dangerous after lunch. So how many felt sleepy, relaxed, calming? And you can just call out your answers.
It felt like a lot longer. I know you said it was just a few minutes, but just having that time, you could enjoy a little bit more time.
Enjoy. Anyone else? Anyone find that you're having lots of thoughts? So all those experiences are quite natural. You can, when you practice mindfulness, you can have lots of thoughts. It's just symptomatic of where you are in that moment. You can feel sleepy. You might start to notice certain tension in the body or areas of discomfort. Or you may feel just very calm and relaxed and open. And it's all good. So has everyone here practiced mindfulness before? Anyone who's new to the practice? Okay. So we often all feel this way, especially in our school communities today. And it's just so important that we are attending to our well-being. That's been the focus of this entire summit. And we want to be able to incorporate practices in a way that's simple and easy to implement just to address what's happening. So our students are really struggling. 80% of students report chronic stress, and 63% of students are below grade level in 12th grade in practically every subject. And 1 in 3 of adolescents actually will have some kind of anxiety disorder by the time they're 18. And 22% of high school students have considered suicide in 2022. And unfortunately, these numbers are just increasing, and we're seeing them at younger and younger ages. But it's not just the students, as we also have been hearing about the importance of attending to educator well-being and the adults in the students' lives. So 78% of educators experience chronic stress. 63% are considering leaving the profession. And it's typically a profession that people enter with a great passion for it and love the joy of teaching and really want to make a difference. So this is a tremendous loss if we start to lose our educators. And 33%, and this is since 2021, and I would venture to say that it's only increased post-pandemic, that are experiencing verbal or physical violence in their school environment. So they're going to school, they're attempting to teach and support the well-being of students in their school community, and they're exposed to more violence and threats. And 29% are experiencing this at the hands of parents and caregivers. So what we're finding now with research, and the American Academy of Pediatrics has come out and actually said that the drills and the lockdowns are actually causing more stress. So they did a comprehensive study, involved 114 schools at the middle school level, and they analyzed 28 million social media posts. And we know that that's often where teens express themselves quite honestly. And they found that 42% experienced enhanced or greater anxiety, and 60% were reporting that they felt unsafe, fearful, and hopeless and sad. So that's one of the reasons that we actually created a school safety series, which I'll be talking to you about later. And then we also know that suspension has a tremendous impact on the trajectory of a student's life. So if a student misses 15 days of suspension, they are 7 times more likely to drop out of school. And we know that puts them on a completely different path in life. Even one day, they're 7.5% more likely to enter the juvenile justice system and have some connection there. And any suspension at all makes them 2 times more likely to be charged or convicted with a crime. There's some really interesting research that's coming out on suspension now. It's the first predictive study, and I'm happy to send it to anyone. You'll have my contact information. But they're actually finding that the suspension rate at the beginning of the school year can predict for the entire year. And depending on the population studied, it can be up as much as 5 times to 10 times more than at the beginning of the school year. So if we can really attend to the well-being right up front when students return back to school, we can have a tremendous impact on suspension. So stress shuts down thinking and learning, and we talked about this just real briefly the other day in our panel. But it leads to harmful brain development. And we know that when the brain shuts down, so the amygdala gets aroused by some event, and historically it worked in our benefit. It enabled us to fight or flee or freeze when presented with a danger. But we actually now activate just from our notifications on our phone, or the phone ringing, or someone coming into our office. Our anxiety starts to increase, and it has a host of physiological symptoms that start right away, and it's a cascading effect. And the main thing that happens is that our decision-making ability, our executive planning and functioning, literally shuts down so that we can prepare to fight, flight, or freeze. And so the stressed brain tends to be blocked and anxious and dysregulated, unfocused, and that makes it extremely difficult for students in the classroom to learn. So their bodies might be in their chair, but their brains and their hearts are elsewhere. So it's not all bad news. So there's actually very good news with a lot of work that's being done, so much of it that you've heard here and through this summit. But positive behavioral interventions, when they take place, especially at younger ages, really can have proven positive outcomes. And when we can build healthier and more positive school climates, then we can have more resilient and healthier school communities. And the daily practice of mindfulness-based social emotional learning really supports this. And as we go through more information, you'll see how. But it can actually have a tremendous impact on reduced suspensions and behavioral referrals. So we say daily mindfulness is the antidote. And there are over 10,000 published studies now, many of which have just occurred in the last decade with regard to, especially in education. And what we find from these is that they're showing across all domains, from healthcare to military to the corporate world. You'll see it in entertainment and sports, that they're understanding that mindfulness has a host of benefits, and including increasing healthy brain connections. So when these practices are used as early childhood, they can foster these healthier brain connections. It improves resilience, and we find that a mindful brain is much more regulated, receptive and open, curious, and able to attend to all the wonderful work that's happening in our school communities. So there's a lot of different definitions as to what mindfulness is. And this is really the definition that's typically used when researchers are looking at what mindfulness is. This was coined by Jon Kabat-Zinn. He was the one who was credited for bringing mindfulness to the West at UMass Medical Center, and was the founder of the Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction Protocol. So mindfulness is really the practice of bringing attention to the present moment in a way that's curious, and it's open, it's non-reactive, we're not judging. That's why when we talked about the experience that we just had, there's no judgment about what the experience is. You're really just tuning into what is. So how many of you have driven somewhere that you habitually go and you have really very little recollection of how you got there? So, yeah. So we do a lot of things in our life very mindlessly. So mindfulness really, when you can start training that attention, it really creates such a more fulfilling life. You tune into your senses. You can use it in everyday life, from whether you're eating or showering in the morning or having a conversation where you're listening mindfully and communicating much more mindfully. And we just spend so little time in the present moment. So the majority of our time really is spent in the future, wondering what's going to happen, anticipating something that may never happen, which is also anxiety producing, or we're ruminating. and filled with regret, things that happened, wish we had said something differently, wish we had made a different choice. So when you think about the fact that the majority of the thoughts we had today, we had yesterday, wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to shift those just simply by being in the present moment? So this is just a graph showing the 40 plus years of research, and you can see how in the last decade or two, it's really increased. So it's much more heavily studied. When I started in this field 30 years ago, I really could talk to most people and they would not have heard about mindfulness. And now it has really become mainstream to the point where, unfortunately, the term is getting overused. You're seeing it on McDonald's commercials. So these are just some of the physical and mental health benefits. In this conference, we're really attending to the physical well-being, but also the mental health and also social emotional learning and behavioral. So anywhere from stress and post-traumatic stress syndrome. They've done a lot of work with the military. I did some work with Walter Reed Army Hospital. So for veterans coming back, it's really a profound practice. Also with refugees. And we actually have, our program is in English and Spanish, but we most recently had it translated, some of our practices translated for Ukrainians. And it was really profound. The person who helped us translate this, because there were so many refugees that were coming here to the United States, but also for those Ukrainians living in the United States and having to see this play out on the world stage. She actually translated these in the shelters at night with candlelight to get this program out there. So that is available. So this is a 2022 meta-review of about 77 studies showing specifically mindfulness in education and the increase in pro-social behavior, improved resilience has been mentioned, reduced anxiety. So what's wonderful is that now there's a much greater body of research that's happening in education to show the efficacy of a daily mindfulness practice. So this is where we see mindfulness-based social emotional learning really getting embedded into the school system. So we say first regulate, then educate. So the main point we're trying to make is that there's all this wonderful curriculum in schools, but if students are not focused and attentive, they can't take that learning in. So they really need to be regulated first. And it's biology before behavior. So it starts with really breathing and grounding and calming and accepting. And that's how they're starting to regulate their biology. And then moving into building self-awareness. So having that attention on our senses, our body, our thoughts and our emotions, and just becoming aware that they're there. I told a story yesterday about the young third grader, and I won't repeat the whole thing here, but who actually had the presence, something very new to him, having typically been very dysregulated and disruptive, but after practicing, had the ability to tell an adult in his life that he wasn't okay. So then from there, we can move to really generating more social awareness and how we connect with others. So fostering empathy and gratitude, compassion, and really building healthier relationships. And finally, this moves into having more self-efficacy and agency. So better decision making, being able to have a growth mindset. And this is where we see the academics start to kick in that there's academic improvement when students can actually take in all the wonderful learning that's taking place. And then they can reach their full human potential. So our program is CASEL approved, and we like to say that we're cultivating all of the capacities of social emotional learning from the inside out. So having those ideas of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, but then also with the CASEL wheel that you see here, it's how it really starts to grow and extend from the classroom, having a better managed classroom, and moving out into the schools and having the entire staff in a school practicing, and then where people take that practice out into the community. And you'll be hearing at the end Discovery Ed video on a high school and the things that they did during the pandemic and how what they created at their school as a result of using mindful awareness practice. So it's also very helpful in terms of a multi-tiered system of support. So it's really a universal intervention. So it's an equitable solution. It's in every classroom this way. Every student, every day gets to practice mindful awareness. And by doing so, it really alleviates some of the burden. We know that the ratio for counselors or social workers to students can be as much as one counselor to 250 students. And what we're hearing from a lot of our schools and districts is that's actually the ideal number in terms of it's often quite larger than that. And so if we can have this as a tier 1 intervention and prevention, just like brushing teeth, we say that brushing teeth for mental health is as toothbrushing is for dental health. It's done every day as a habit. And then we can start moving through the tiers with small groups. We have practices that I'll be talking about for small group interactions, for counselors and school psychologists to use with students, or for restorative practices and positive behavioral supports, and then also with one-on-one for tier 3. So we've done a lot of work in various communities, and about 74% of our schools are tier 1. But we were working with a school in West Virginia. This was a very heavily opioid addicted community. The majority of the students either had a student who had a parent or caregiver that had been incarcerated or who had succumbed to an opioid overdose. And they were really at loose ends in the school. They had tried everything. They brought in Reiki people. They were trying every intervention they could think of, but it was really challenging. And the educators were really getting to the point where they had so much compassion fatigue and burnout that they were considering leaving the school. And they started using Inner Explorer every day. And soon they started to notice some improvements, and by the end of the year, what they saw was really dramatic. So many of the students had moved from tier 3 down to tier 2, down to tier 1, and they saw improvements, and these were first and second graders, in both their reading and math scores. So not only did they attend to the behavior, and they said the behavior went down by as much as 60%. So I just wanted to take a pause here, and I thought we'd do another practice. And since it was after lunch and I don't want to put you all to sleep, I thought we'll do some mindful movement. So I invite you again to just initially where you are, but you will be moving from sitting to standing. So if you need to move anything from around you to make that an easier transition, please feel free to do so. All right. So I'm going to invite you again to just close your eyes or softly gaze downward. And you'll start with sitting if that's comfortable, but you can also be standing. And just start to focus in on your breath and noticing the breath just wherever it is in your body. And if it feels more comfortable, you can also tune into the sounds both in the room or outside of the room. And just continue to focus your attention on whatever you've selected. And when you're ready, gently escorting your attention to noticing the contact that you're making either with the floor with your feet, or if sitting on the chair, perhaps your back against the chair. And just sensing into the body. And whether you're sitting or standing, just noticing the feet and the contact on the floor, sensing into the ankle, the heel, the ball of the foot, maybe the toes, without moving them, seeing if you can sense into each individual toe. And just having an idea of what's around you, kind of the proprioception, knowing what's around you through sensing. And for those of you who are sitting, as safely and easily as you can, keeping your eyes closed or gazing downward, just very slowly moving to a standing position. And noticing the muscles that were used, any readjustments that you're making with your hands or your arms, and just really sensing into the body as you make that movement. And when you're ready, just very gently moving your left arm as you bring it out to your side and moving it up towards the ceiling. Just leaving it there for a moment. And without moving your hand, sensing into each individual finger, almost as if you were tracing a line from the base of your thumb all the way around to your pinky. And when you're ready, slowly and gently move your arm downwards, but do it as slowly as you can. We're so used to making faster movements. And now taking the right arm and very slowly moving it up towards the sky, feeling all the muscles that engage, perhaps lowering the shoulders if they traveled upwards as well. Again, tracing to sense into each individual finger from the base of the thumb to the pinky of your right hand. And now you can gently lower it. And now I thought we'd do a little mindful walking, which will probably be a nightmare for the videotaping, but we'll do that anyway. And we have room. Now that's the advantage of us being a smaller group. So I think you can all hear me without the microphone. Is this on? It's on? It's okay? All right, so we're going to move around the room and just at first, just start moving. Again, you're going to have your gaze downward. You do not close your eyes for this one. And just really be sensing into your feet and your legs as you move. And at first, it may feel awkward. Sometimes people start to giggle a little bit. And you'll need to turn at different points. And notice your breath as you're moving. And even begin noticing your thoughts. Perhaps you're saying, I really wish I could move faster, or I want to go in a different direction. Or maybe your thoughts begin to wander elsewhere. And if they do, just bring them back to the body. Try to sense into every muscle that you move and the heel as it's making contact with the ground, rolling through the ball of your foot to the toe. And when you're ready, just start to very slowly make your way back to your table. And try to sit down mindfully. So what was that experience like for everybody? And if you're still moving, that's great. Just take your time. Anyone find it challenging to really slow down to that pace? Maybe did you feel a little awkward at first? Calming? What about the activity of the mind? What were you noticing there? I'm sorry? All over the place? Lexi? Thank you, yes. So at first you can have lots of thoughts and then the mind starts to settle. Anybody else? Okay. So we actually use an educator advisory council within Explore. It's really important to us that we're getting feedback from our educators who are actually in the classrooms using the program. And this is Megan Searle. She's one of our advisory council members, and she's actually with LAUSD, and she's also a research fellow. And she used the program, and we started hearing that she was talking about it at an SEL symposium for LAUSD. And so they actually asked her to create a little video. So we'll play that now. And I think it will play automatically.
Hello, my name is Megan Seville, and I'm a third grade teacher at Broadway Elementary in Venice.
I don't know if you can hear her.
It's an important tool in my classroom for helping students to manage their emotions, transition between activities, and be ready.
Play it again. Oh, okay. Oh, so John's okay. So while we're waiting for him to come back, I can always come back to that slide. So we'll just keep moving. So our program is very simple to implement. We know that educators are very busy and overwhelmed. There's a lot of curriculum to fit into a school day. So we've really made it no prep, no curriculum, no planning. They're 5 to 10-minute practices, and that includes 2 minutes of journaling. And it's audio guided, so it's 180 days worth of practice, and it's sequenced to the school year. So it really eliminates all that planning that educators have to do. We've heard that there are studies out there now showing that teachers are spending as much as 4 additional hours of their own personal time trying to plan their SEL lessons. And even if they have curriculum, they have to learn that curriculum in order to teach it. So that's why we're really keen on really cultivating these capacities from the inside out, just through doing the daily practice. And the model is that educators practice along with their students. So we've seen that it impacts grades and behavior, but is also stress, attendance, and really leads to more retention for teachers. And it's very scalable. So we do district portals so that our districts can very easily register everyone. They get a welcome letter. So signing up is really less than 5 minutes and getting their classroom journey started. And then they can just hit play, and every day it automatically advances. We also feel it's really important to have diverse narrators. So we have different narrators from various ages, ethnicities, gender, even geographically, that are part of our program. And Gloria was talking about that yesterday, how meaningful that was for her to hear, for her students to hear voices that are not only like themselves, but different from themselves. And we also connect school to home. So we have a companion mobile app that was very helpful during COVID. We actually had it in production just before that, and we rolled it out very quickly to all our schools so that we could really connect school to home. And for those students that were learning at home and might not have had Wi-Fi connection, they could use their parents or caregivers' mobile app and have access to the practices. And we also have something called Tune In, which I'll talk about later. So we really try to make this very affordable for schools to implement. And we're an evidence-based program. We have randomized controlled studies on our program that demonstrated 43% reduction in teacher stress and secondary burnout, as well as 60% fewer behavioral issues and disruptions in the classroom. And then we know that when we can attend to that behavior, as I've mentioned, then we start to see the gains in academic performance. And with special ed students, they saw a 35% improvement in reading and increases in grade point average. So this is a recent chart that we put together based on a school in Florida. And we were so excited to see these results. I'm sure most of you are familiar that the national averages for reading for English language arts and math have been on the decline pretty much everywhere. Some have remained stagnant. And this is a school in Florida that over several years, so this isn't an immediate change that happens, but it went from an F to an A on the state testing. So they were 36% better than the national average in math and 32% higher than the Florida average. Florida tends to sometimes be higher than the national averages. And then in English language arts, they were 50% better than the national average and 53% better than the Florida average. And so we reached out, we asked them what they were doing, and they said outside of the regular typical curriculum, the only thing they did was InterExplorer, but they did it every single day and the entire school did it. But what's most compelling about this chart for me is that 80% of the students came from the homeless shelter across the street. So you know that they have a lot of additional challenges and trauma that they're dealing with. And we're really looking to replicate this at every school across the nation. So how does it work? Just as I mentioned before, 5 minutes of setup, 180 days. It's integrated for the SEL lesson, so there's no additional curriculum that's necessary. The audio guided practices also have different backgrounds that the classrooms can pick. That's often something that they like. We try to give as much choice as possible. And there are also transition and sound practices. So ideally, the regular practice is used every day, and then you can incorporate transition or sound practices after lunch or recess. And the reflective journaling time is really important to us because that's when these lessons get integrated. And Gloria shared some of the reflections that her class did yesterday. So if it's okay, I'm just going to go back to some of the slides so we can do that video again. See, John, we just can't do without you.
Hello, my name is Megan Cyril, and I'm a third grade teacher at Broadway Elementary in Venice. Inner Explorer is an important tool in my classroom for helping students to manage their emotions, transition between activities, and be ready for learning. We recently had an unannounced fire alarm incident at my school. I usually let the students know when we have drills, so this incident really shook up the class. Coming back into the classroom, we had a debrief like we usually do, but I noticed my students were not quite ready to get back into content. So I adjusted, and we used an Inner Explorer practice to help us reset. Students were much better able to engage after this mindfulness practice. If you haven't tried Inner Explorer yet, I highly recommend it. My students have enjoyed the practices, and it's helped to make our classroom a safe and calm space for learning.
So that's Megan, who we adore, but they were using that in the district to encourage other teachers to engage with the program. So this is our school safety toolkit. And we created this in response to the research that we were seeing about the negative impact of the drills and the lockdowns and how it was actually increasing the stress of students and educators, as well as families that get notified that their school is on lockdown. And that's, as you can imagine, as a parent or a caregiver, that's terrifying. So we really promote the daily practice as the foundation, not only to help build resiliency so that when these things happen, students can help kind of come back online with their nervous system more quickly, but also so that it starts to reduce some of the violent and aggressive behavior that we're seeing in schools across the nation. And we included best practices for conducting the drills in a way that was much more trauma informed. Some schools in the United States are actually doing live simulations. And this is obviously something that we want to discourage. But there are ways that the drills can be handled more sensitively with at least giving notice, for example, not making them live, kind of just entering into them in steps instead of all at once as a major drill. And that's all included. And then we created those settle and soothe practices for any kind of event. Whether in California, we've seen obviously with the fires and earthquake drills, in other parts of the country, some severe flooding. So all of these things really are impacting our school communities and just the fear around them. We want to make sure that they have some of these practices to help support. We actually went into Paradise and Chico after the fires. They were all dislocated from Paradise, but we gave them our program and they used it extensively, and it really helped. They just, as you can imagine, just not having the school community as the hub, all the work that you do, and just listening to the stories after the pandemic or during the pandemic and how that became such a lifeline to families. You can imagine what it's like when a community doesn't have the schools, doesn't have the churches, they don't have the places where people gather. So the students and the adults in their lives were really suffering a tremendous loss. So we were happy that we could at least provide this kind of support for them. So we also support positive behavioral supports and restorative practices, and that's all included. And then we offer guidance for parents on how to really talk to your students about safety in age-appropriate ways. And then this is a video of a student. This video was done by a school district in Texas. It's one of the border towns. A lot of the students are Spanish speaking, so they use our Spanish program. And this was actually a special education class. And they created a wonderful video. This is just a very short excerpt of it, and I'm happy to share the complete video of a young boy talking about how he feels when he practices.
Inner Explore me hace sentir relajado, me quita lo nervioso, me quita lo triste, me quita lo enojado. Inhalo y exhalo y me ayuda a no estar mucho triste y no llorar.
I just love seeing him. I just think he's so cute. So in addition to the daily practice, we really want to make sure that we're providing something for every stakeholder within the school community. So we have a counselor series that with specialized practices that are topical in nature that can be used in small groups and also one-on-one. And we also have an educator well-being series. And these practices are great to use at staff meetings or at home for additional practice. Gloria was talking yesterday about how she likes to use her own mindful awareness practice before she even comes to school, and then she does the daily practice along with her students. But these are additional practices, including ones about teacher appreciation, some about holiday stress, and just general body scans and anchoring throughout the day. And this is from a Teach for America teacher that is now still an educator, I'm happy to say, but he said if it weren't for practicing daily mindfulness, that after his first year, he would have left the teaching profession. And then we also have summer practices for summer series. And so we have a camp series as well as activities for and practices that can be used all summer long so that we can really bridge throughout the entire school year. We also saw that again this summer, that a lot of schools really extended that summer learning program to keep continuity and help with some of the learning recovery. And we bridge school to home. So families get access to all 4 age-appropriate programs in English and Spanish as part of our program. But we also have a feature called Tune In. And Tune In allows parents and caregivers to actually listen to the exact same practice that's happening in the classroom, real time if they choose to do so, or they get a playlist. And we find that this really creates a much stronger bridge from school to home. Also, we know that parents and caregivers appreciate the transparency, so they actually get to know exactly what their students are listening to at school. And this is an elementary grade student who talked about sharing the practices at home. And we actually created Tune In because this is what we were hearing from our students, that my mom could really use this. Or my grandmother, we had a grandmother who was very ill, and her grandchild taught, the practices to help with a lot of pain that she was experiencing. I'll tell you from my own personal experience, I taught both of my boys they're now young men, but I taught them both how to practice from very young ages. And I can tell you that more than once I was on the receiving end of a suggestion that maybe I would want to go practice a little mindfulness. So again, it's all about simplicity and scalability. We are integrated with all the LMS systems. We also create custom designed portals that can be hubs for communication, but mostly also for easy registration. And then this is a video that shows the transformation that goes out into the community. And this was done by Discovery Ed, and we were involved in an experience happiness program with them. John Marshall High School was a high school that had been using the program regularly, especially in one of their Spanish classes. And one of the students, after losing a friend who succumbed to suicide, felt like more needed to be done. And so he took it upon himself to go to administration and lobby for some funds to create a wellness center in the school and an advisory council. And this talks about how they set up that program.
When you practice the 6 sustainable happiness skills, You can't help but feel a shift. You start to view challenges differently. They aren't huge roadblocks. Instead, they're opportunities. Mindfulness allows us to literally take a breath, bringing awareness so we're more open to noticing the positive. A group of students created a wellness advisory, practicing mindfulness with Inner Explorer.
Today I thought we could start off with like a little check-in, as we do. Once I joined the wellness advisory, I was like, wow, people actually care about you here, and they actually care about your mental health.
More than anything, the advisory is about community. I know that I felt very supported by the people around me.
I'm feeling very touched to see you all, especially the new faces. We call ourselves Wellness Advisory. Our mission is to support students, to make sure they're never alone, and to promote wellness in all aspects, so physical, mental, social, emotional, all of it.
Just to warm us all up, we can start off with mindfulness so that we are all able to tune into our own bodies.
The advisory came about because this was a school that had exceptionally high numbers of students with high levels of school-related anxiety, problems of self-harm. Students were saying we need something that is part of our everyday school experience to provide us with social emotional support.
They said, okay, we have to do something, but not that came from the administration, something that came from us. So the Wellness Advisory was an avenue for them to do mindfulness and discuss what were their troubles.
Close your eyes, aware of all the thoughts that come and go.
And it's amazing that being good, doing things with a purpose is cool.
Being a founding member was a really beautiful experience because people from all different interests were coming together to make one big community.
I didn't really know what mindfulness was about. All I really knew as a principal is that my students are very stressed and anxiety levels very high. I thought it's worth a shot.
So as you breathe in and out, slowly moving your hands together.
Everyone thinks I'm happy a lot of the time because I do a lot of smiling and I try to be as kind to people as I can. But it's been really rough. I have anxiety and ADHD, so I feel very anxious all the time. Doing mindfulness, I'm able to bring it back and kind of center myself.
At first, I'll be honest, I was a little bit skeptical. I was like, oh, I'm just sitting here doing deep breathing. But I usually walk out like, oh, that was really nice. That's exactly what I needed today, was a second to stop and breathe.
It's helped me go through every wave of emotion, knowing that I could always just stop, check in with myself, see how I'm doing, and just let myself settle down.
Excellent practice, y'all.
Mindfulness is a strong tool to reflect. You feel good, you feel happy. It becomes like a little ignition, right? It's something that ignites something. You want to do something else.
The Wellness Advisory is a place where we can help ourselves and then learn how we can help others better.
So just think about how you felt, and I really enjoyed it.
I'm feeling really happy.
Now it's clear to me that our students would be better off after they leave high school if they know how to practice some of these strategies.
If it wasn't for mindfulness, I don't think I would be here today. It'd be life-changing.
Seeing them today was definitely a boost of happiness around campus.
The advisory has become an essential part of the fabric of this school. They try to change hearts and minds on campus. Hey, you should try mindfulness. Oh, you're having a hard day? How's your breathing? And it seems ridiculous to say it, but without them, it wouldn't be happening.
We wanted to be role models for the rest of our community. When you see others around you practicing it, you tend to want to learn from them and their experience if they're having a really great time with it.
We have accomplished so much. It's very exciting to see. My little heart goes pitter-patter.
They're wonderful. And during the pandemic, and this is how we see it move out into the community, they actually reached out to those that were infirmed or elderly and made sure that they had connection. They wrote letters to them, and they did a variety of other projects that were really community oriented. And they were doing this all while they themselves were going through the pandemic. So this is just from a high school student. We actually started receiving all this feedback on one particular day from students. And we don't typically communicate directly with students. That's often how our districts prefer it. And we started getting all of these reflections. And what we learned, I'll just read it very quickly. Good afternoon. I wanted to say that I really enjoy this program. It gives me the ability to have some peace and quiet from the very busy setting that my school is in. I enjoy the music that is incorporated into the sessions. The reflections at the end of the recordings are always very therapeutic. They're given special journal prompts each time. I'm very grateful to have this program in my English class. I've noticed very positive changes since the program started. I started feeling less anxious and more focused throughout my classes. I believe this program has done a great job and should continue doing what they do, which of course we're very grateful to hear that because these are the students that we're trying to serve. But what we found out is that the educator had actually incorporated this into their English class. So this was a writing assignment. So this is our contact information. Christy is in the San Diego area. We also have someone in Northern California. I am here. But we also really wanted to have the opportunity to have you all kind of group together in the time that we have. I think I'm still quite a bit ahead of time. So if you just want to kind of share with a partner how you might see incorporating a daily mindfulness practice in whatever setting that you're currently working in, or how you might spread it out into the community. We're really trying to reach 10 million mindful children. We're doing a project in Michigan called, it's the first statewide project, Mindful Michigan. And I'm really cheerleading for California. I want the first Californian. Kirsten and I were trying to figure out something that sounded good, like Mindful Michigan for California. So I'm accepting any suggestions. But if you could just take a few moments and just talk amongst yourself, and then we'll share it out. And then I'll just spend a few minutes with any questions that you might have, and then we'll be done. Okay, do we have a couple minutes just to hear everybody? Okay. It's 3 my time? Okay. Okay. So if I can just get everyone's attention again, I'd love to hear from all of you kind of what you were discovering as you were talking. We were talking over here about using it in after-school programs, and we do work with Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, extension programs with after school. And I don't know if you want to share anything, but my lovely partner was talking about how, the challenges that students have going from a full day of school, then right into after school where they're still having to do so much more, and it's a long day. So it would be nice for them to have this opportunity to kind of have a reset. Anybody else want to share ways that you think about incorporating? Staff meetings? Yeah.
Taking the kids, done dismissal, and before you start the staff meeting or go into collaboration or go into grade level of your departments, it'd be great to just take a few minutes to kind of get ready, to shift into the next part of your day. Your day's not over.
Yes.
So, the first half is, but not the second half, or transitioning before you go home, no matter what your job is.
Wonderful. Yes, definitely before staff meetings. Anybody? Yeah.
Right before a test.
Right before a test. I'm so glad you mentioned that. In our transition practices, we have special test-taking practices. So, and ideally, if they're doing the practice every day, then that's already keeping the anxiety level down. But then there's just a real short one they can do it's a minute or two long before the practice, before the test. Anything from?
Before presentations, too.
Mm-hmm.
On yourself down before you have to
Speak. Yes, we say that public speaking is what, feared more than death? So just real quick, some best practices, stick with it. There may be some objections or challenges in the beginning, and you just keep doing it. You have a fairly easy attitude with the students as long as they are being respectful and not interfering with someone else. Sometimes, especially with the older students, you'll see some maybe put their heads down on their desk, whatever, but they're taking it in. And what we find is that those students who are most challenged with the practice initially are the ones that if you don't practice it, and we hear this all the time from our teachers on a particular the day, they're the ones that are doing the reminding because they get a very early on a felt sense of how different it feels for them to do these practices. And dim the lights, kind of have everyone sitting forward, and it's really about modeling. That's why we created it, so the educators are getting the practices along with the students. Any questions before we close? Everyone's good? Everyone's ready to get on the road? Thank you for your time and attention. I'm really grateful for all of you and the very important work that you do.